Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about the Benjamin Cowen channel and its native token, Ben. If you, if you like the content, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and stake your ADA with the TIA staking pool. Let's go ahead and jump in.
Sounds
How'd
good.
you like that?
That's pretty good. Pretty
Awesome.
good.
I'm pretty corny like that. Sorry if this is the first time people are finding me because I've got your name in the title. So anyway, thanks very much, Ben, for jumping on. We've got a little while until Ben has to get his kids off to gymnastics. So we're going to crack straight into altcoins, altcoin exit strategies, a brief chat on metaverse, everything around altcoins and whether Ben actually trades anything apart from Bitcoin and Ethereum that we see on the channel. Sound good?
Sounds good to me. Thanks for having me.
All right, you're welcome. If you guys want to find Ben, links are in the description down below. You guys know how it works. Click on the names, go across to Ben. No BS cryptocurrency trading over there as well. Ben, altcoins. Let's go straight in. If we can talk about it, what's in your portfolio? What are you trading? And your thoughts on the markets, where we're going from here. Is the bull trap still in play? Plenty of questions. I'll let you crack on.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so I think it's no surprise that the main two I hold are Bitcoin and Ethereum, right? They're the blue chips. I feel like you got to hold those. And then the altcoins are always these speculative plays. You never really know if they're going to be around in 5 years or not, right? If you go back to 2013, you had things like, WorldCoin and BBQ coin making up the top 12 and stuff, and MadeSafe coin. So it's like, it's hard to know what altcoins will be around in 5 years. And for all we know, in 5 years, there could be altcoins in the top 10 that don't even exist today, right? So with altcoins, Bitcoin and Ethereum are my main two. And I don't really, when I talk about Bitcoin and Ethereum, I don't consider Ethereum an altcoin, even though by the strictest definition of an altcoin, it is an altcoin. But when I refer to altcoins, I don't mean Ethereum. A lot of the other altcoins that I talk about on my channel are Cardano, Avalanche, Polkadot, and Chainlink. Those are the main ones that we've spoken about. We've also touched on other projects as well. On some of the live streams, we'll cover, Solana, VeChain, Tezos, whatever people are curious about, XRP, Litecoin, and all these various cryptocurrencies that, people have bags in. They want to know, okay, well, how are they going to perform? Like, what do you think about them? And my standard for altcoins is pretty high, right? If it bleeds against Bitcoin or if it bleeds against Ethereum, and that's all it ever does, then there's really no point in holding it, because you're basically taking on more risk and getting a lower return, right? So that's obviously something we want to avoid. And so those are the main ones I talk about on the channel, those that I just mentioned, and we sort of just cycle through them, right? Like I'll talk about one, and then the next week I might talk about a different one. But it's primarily Bitcoin and Ethereum, and then beyond that, we keep it pretty light, I would say, in terms of what we talk about.
So, what do you think then about Cardano? Looking at these projects which tend to bleed, and we're seeing Cardano bleed against Bitcoin right now, bleed against Ethereum. Mm-hmm. What would you say? Do you think this has the longevity? I know that this could really piss off a lot of the ADA Moon boys. But
oh yeah, no, it's fine. I mean, I don't. Yeah, but it's the downside. One of the downsides of talking about any altcoin are that you attract the audience that thinks that specific altcoin is going to overtake Bitcoin, right? And it's just simply the likelihood of that happening is it's very unlikely, right? It's very unlikely. I would say it's more likely that Ethereum flips Bitcoin than, say an altcoin were to flip Ethereum, to be completely honest. But I don't see either of those happening this year or anytime soon, right? It'd be a while before anything like that could happen anyways. But, projects like Cardano, while they have been bleeding in the short term, that is true. You have to also look at sort of the macro scale and say, are they at least oscillators against Bitcoin? Are they oscillating against Ethereum? And you can at least see that ADA goes to these patterns against ETH. It goes to these. It's still generally up against Bitcoin. I mean, I think since March it's up 500% against Bitcoin. So while it has been bleeding over the last few weeks, we can't discount that. All right, it still went up 100x. From March 2020 until today, because we watched it at 2 cents a year and a half ago. Today it's trading at $2, and the biggest thing with ADA is I think it's, as I said back then, I think it's a nice hedge against Ethereum, but I don't think it's going to overtake Ethereum. Like I don't think it has. I think it's going to form its own like niche, and that's a good thing. And there's going to be communities that rally around these various projects, but I don't see it overtaking Ethereum. I just think that you sort of have to be pragmatic about things and recognize that Ethereum, you already have this huge network effect, right? People, the fees are high, of course, right? But it's because people use it, right? There's so many people that actually use Ethereum, and furthermore, that's not to discount ADA. I mean, I understand that they're still in the development phase, and they have to get the Plutus backend up for the smart contracts can actually become fully functional and whatnot. But it's not going to overtake Ethereum in that sense. And a lot of these projects that claim to be the best thing since sliced bread, that have lower fees, right? Binance Smart Chain, you have these other projects that have these lower fees and whatnot, and a lot of people might say, well, isn't this so much better technology than what Ethereum has, right? But it's like, no, the Binance Smart Chain once upon a time started off as a clone of Go Ethereum. Like it's all they did was raise, they raised the limit on what could be included in one block, and so by doing that, you become more centralized, right? And Ethereum's just not willing to compromise on that. So these projects that claim to kind of have it figured out over Ethereum, I don't think. I think it's sort of like it's a nuanced thing. Yeah, Ethereum could solve these issues if it wanted to in a heartbeat, but they're sort of doing it. They're wanting to progress in the most decentralized way as possible. So yeah, you do attract the people that sort of think that all these projects are just going to overtake the blue chips. But if history is any indication, that generally is not going to happen.
I think about that as well. Like you said, made safe coin. I remember that from the old days. Yeah. I see Syscoin pop up every now and then. I'm like, you guys are nuts. Yeah. So Vertcoin, all this sort of stuff. The only one that's really done it has been Dogecoin, and I didn't pick it. I'm pretty sure you didn't pick it. Yes. That's wild, just to be able to overtake and actually not bleed against Bitcoin and bleed against Ethereum and actually take share away from it.
Yeah, so, it's true. It's almost like, I feel like we live in a world where memes are fundamentals. It's like, does it have the meme? I don't own Dogecoin. I'm just to be clear, but that's not really a hit against anyone who does, because anyone who does is laughing their way to the bank, right? I mean, so yeah.
But do you dubiously speculate in Dogecoin?
I have spoken about it actually on my channel a couple of times. Mainly because back in 2020, I told people, I was like, look, guys, I don't own it, but it does tend to go up through these parabolic rallies against Bitcoin, right? Like if you just hold it long enough, it usually gets a catalyst, right? So if someone were to ask me today, is Dogecoin going to go higher? I would probably say, yeah, like eventually it probably will go higher. Eventually it will take out these milestones that people are looking for. I wouldn't bet against that, right? At all.
Yeah. Speaking of altcoins, what else do you have in the portfolio? If you don't want to mention them because they're too small of a market cap, just mention the size of the market cap. So how many would you say you hold?
Yeah, so I mean, I mainly the main ones that I hold are just 6 of them. So I have, and those are the largest positions that I have by far. So, and those are just Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano, Avalanche, Polkadot, and Chainlink. Chainlink has actually not been the best performer over the last year. Fortunately, it has done relatively well, through the bear market. So it's still sort of holding its own when you look at, say, the returns it's experienced over the market cycle. But those are the main 6 that I have. There are, of course, others. I sometimes have, I do have some small positions in some other coins. I think Matic is a fairly decent project as well. They're focusing on roll-ups and whatnot and becoming roll-up centric. I think that's very complementary to Ethereum. People always ask me about like these like smaller market cap coins, right? Like micro caps and whatnot. And it would be a lie to say that I've never dabbled in them, right? It's hard. It's certainly hard to say that you've never bought something. It's just that I make the point to not talk about it, right? I don't want to be seen as like, hey, I'm going to go buy this micro cap and then I'm gonna like pump it up or something. Like I don't want to do that. So I think the smallest one that I have in my portfolio right now is probably has a market cap of I don't know. I know I have one that has a market cap of less than 300 million.
I was hoping for like a 5 million market cap, but it's probably too small.
So to be completely honest, I mean, like they're probably I probably have tons of those, right? Like because there's so many wallets over the years that probably have like small dust of things, but like I don't even know what they are or have any desire to go figure out what they are. So yeah, I probably do have some stuff, and also like now sometimes you just get random airdrops for using different platforms and stuff. So that's happened before. But I don't really consider myself as owning those. I mean, technically, I guess
no, stuff that you've consciously gone out to.
Yeah. There's not very many at this point. Mainly because I think it's very distracting. And a lot of times too, you have to think, if you put in, say, like let's say you put in like $10,000 or $1,000 into 10 different micro caps. If all of them go to zero and one of them goes up 10x, then you're basically back to where you started. Right? If one of them goes up 100x and the others go to zero, then you've made 10x on your investment. But you could also argue that if you had just held Ethereum and you put everything into Ethereum, you could have seen potentially that same return and taken on a lot less risk. So,
it's just patience in that regard.
Yeah.
And a lot of people come in late and they don't have the patience.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I know a lot of micro caps too are, I mean, yeah, they've made people a lot of money, but there's tons that never do anything. And so you sort of just have that kind of like survivorship bias of, oh, look at all these ones that went up a lot. There's still a lot that haven't done anything, because we know there's over like 10,000 cryptocurrencies and they're not all going up. And there's actually a lot of non micro caps that they still haven't even put in all-time highs from 2017. Like XRP is a good example of a coin that hasn't put in new all-time highs. Litecoin, I think, went to the prior all-time high, but it so there's plenty of examples of altcoins that there's huge communities around them, and eventually they'll probably trend up with time. But are they being systematically outperformed by the blue chips? And if they are, then it's like again, I give this example all the time. If in 2019, if you were loading up on Ethereum as opposed to Litecoin, your Litecoin position, if you loaded up on Litecoin instead, it's down 90% against ETH over the last 2 years. So. And look, a lot of Litecoin people don't like me because I point out these things, and I'm like, look, don't take it up with me. Take it up with the data. I'm just telling you what the data shows me is that it's down 90% against Ethereum, and and then anytime it goes up, right? They say, oh, look, I told you it was going to go up, and I'm like, look, Litecoin will probably go up, right? I'd be surprised if it didn't make it to the prior all-time high from 2017. But to give you an example, I mean. For these other blue chips to be below their 2017, 2018 all-time highs, that means we'd have to have a Bitcoin below 20K. We'd have to have Ethereum below $1,400. Ethereum's now at what, 4,500, 4,600. Bitcoin's at 64K. Yeah, it shows you the opportunity cost, right? The opportunity cost is very important.
Yeah, and you just notice it with a lot of new people that come in. It's just the easiest thing to spout online that you see from a lot of people. Go buy Litecoin, go buy XRP, EOS, all this sort of stuff, and it just doesn't really go anywhere. So they're sort of losing money, but they only reflect on the USD value of that coin. So,
right.
Speaking of 20x's, I need something for the thumbnail and the title. What would be your 20x from this point in the market? 20x in 20 days.
I don't have any 20x in 20 days. Yeah, no, I don't know. I mean, I think that I mean, there's certainly projects with a lot of potential. I mean, I think that you take a look at a lot of the layer ones, right? And there's like this money ball that sort of goes around from one to another. And we know it's been on Solana for a long time, and Solana's done exceptionally well, right, this cycle. Cardano has done exceptionally well. It's gone up 100x. Avalanche is one that has been doing relatively well recently. But, for these projects to go up 20x in 20 days or something, it's, you're talking about pretty insane valuations in a relatively short period of time. But also, you can't discount the fact that when things get parabolic, you can't really predict those things. I mean, I do think there's certainly some of these projects can go up 10x maybe between now and the end of the cycle. But we're certainly not in 2018 where it seems like we're at the cycle bottom and everything just can go up 100x or 1000x. Like a lot of the projects are already up 100x, right? So it's like, how much more can they be squeezed out for the rest of the cycle before we have to consolidate for more than a couple months?
So for new people coming in, what do you say to them? Because we're so far up. Would you say to get in or wait until the next bear market? That question comes up quite often.
Yeah. So I think it's generally too risky not to hold Bitcoin, especially I mean, so Bitcoin went to 64K, and back then it was very overheated. And I told people, look, guys, like we're pretty far overheated right now. Now the 60K, we're at the 60K range now. It's not as overheated as it was back then. Now that doesn't mean we can't go back down or test maybe the 20-week SMA or test some of these lower values again. But I think DCA is the right approach, like dollar cost average into the market. In the stock market, that's generally not the correct approach, actually. In the stock market, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that just lump sum is the correct strategy, just because the stock market generally trends up with time. Crypto, unfortunately, it does generally trend up with time, but if someone lump summed everything in 2017 at 20K, they'd have to wait 3 years basically just to get their money back, not including inflation. So they would be much better off just DCAing into the market. So I would say that I think the better approach is to DCA into the market, and then
with the blue chips.
Yeah, start with the blue chips. Generally, I think is the best idea, like Bitcoin and Ethereum, because they're going to be around more than likely in the next 5 or 10 years. So you're doing your future self a favor. Any other project, you never really know, right? And that does
including
make
Cardano.
Oh yeah, including Cardano, Polkadot, Avalanche, Chainlink, all these projects that I have. Like I all hope they do well. I hope they do well, and I think they will. But there's also projects that every cycle, everyone always thinks they're going to be the next best thing, and then a few years later, it's like they're just not there anymore. And go look at what was in the top 10 last market cycle. Like
I just remember EOS. EOS was the big thing, and now. Even the founder or the foundation, who was it? The CEO of the foundation is just like, this is a crap project. Said it's a failure, and they're trying to rebuild it.
Well, they raised a lot of money. I remember that.
$4 billion.
Yeah, it was like if it was either the most successful or one of the most successful ICOs back then, I believe. But I always have an issue with stuff like that, generally speaking. But that's just one example. There was a lot of other projects that were up in the top 10, right? That were just like a lot of Bitcoin forks, and everyone acts like they're these great things and stuff, and then they slowly just slip away, and people over time never hear them again.
So with that said, would you sell out of all your other positions except for Bitcoin and ETH at the top, you see a top come in?
I think it depends on how convinced I am we are at a market cycle top. I talk about these things like a well-oiled machine. Like I have a lot of altcoins earning interest through staking, through lending, that kind of stuff, and a lot of people could probably they have these things running and they're living off that interest, right? This is one of the great things about crypto is if you get that machine set up, you can just be living off that interest, and regardless of what the price of the token does, as long as it stays somewhat reasonable, the interest, maybe one week you get paid $100 or, and one other week you get paid $50, depending on what the price is doing and what the payout schedule is. But I would say, like, I never really fully sell all of my crypto, but I do certainly sell some, like all of my, like certain altcoin positions. So I won't generally sell all of my Bitcoin because I don't like selling Bitcoin that I haven't been holding for at least a year, because I'm in the United States and I have to pay short-term capital gains taxes on it. And I don't really like paying 40% on Bitcoin trades, or on the profit. So I would say I generally would always hold at least some Bitcoin and probably some Ethereum no matter what, just because at the end of the day, we have all of our models and whatnot, but no one really knows exactly what's going to happen, right? No one really knows for 100%. And it's better to have something. I sort of consider the short-term gain territory positions that I have, my hodl stack that I don't really trade. But as far as the other stuff, I would sell out most of it, I think. But there are certain things, like if I'm running stake pools and whatnot, I'm going to keep those going. Like I'm going to keep those going and whatnot. I'm not going to. I'll just run those to the bear market and just keep them going. So yeah, I would say again, the other thing too is it depends on how convinced I am that it's a market cycle peak. Like if the entire asset class is at say 12 trillion or something in say 12 months, then like I'm probably going to be running for the hills, with with the profits. But if we're say at like 5 trillion in 12 months, which would be more or less a 2x from here, that's a bit more reasonable, right? Like we can kind of respect that growth and maybe it can be sustained, right? But if it gets too crazy too quickly, then I get nervous and I start running for the hills.
Speaking of market caps, then, do you think market caps are real to be doing calculations by these days in crypto? Do you know, like we saw Hex, right? Like that thing's not worth what it's worth. It's just that there's no liquidity in it. So are market caps a real metric that we can really use, or is it just the metric that we use within crypto and compare it within crypto?
It certainly is good from like a relative perspective, like comparing one altcoin to another altcoin. Like, is one altcoin undervalued compared to another altcoin? I think there is some truth in like how, like, I mean, I don't want to say that market caps aren't important at all, but it's not like the old days where you can measure the valuation of a company based on their earnings or whatnot. Like a lot of this is just really highly speculative stuff. And it's driven on narratives, on momentum, on memes, on like herd mentality, that kind of stuff. So I don't necessarily think you can take the market cap of a project and take it to the bank or something and say, all right, this is what it's definitely worth. But if you look at, say, various projects and you say, well, we're looking at these layer ones and we see that Solana and Cardano and Binance Smart Chain, they're all trading up here at like 60 to 90 billion. And then you have some other projects like Avalanche and Polkadot that are, trading at, say, 20 billion for Avalanche or whatever it is. And maybe for Polkadot, I think like 40 billion or something. So I look at that kind of stuff and say, well, relatively speaking, I would say that some projects can be undervalued compared to other projects based on their market capitalization. But I wouldn't necessarily say that they're always undervalued with respect to the US dollar, because if Bitcoin drops, the entire market's going to drop. And then then it really puts a new definition as to what's undervalued or overvalued, right? Like if Bitcoin drops.
Yeah, everything else just tanks from that point. But when we use like Bitcoin's a $1.2 trillion market cap and silver's a 1.3 trillion market cap, can we really say it's the same thing? We sort of like to compare. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I guess it depends on what you're trying to accomplish with saying it's the same thing. I mean, I think it certainly has.
Well, we're trying to accomplish just giving Peter Schiff some crap.
Yeah. No, I mean, I certainly look at them. I mean, I go look at to see if Bitcoin's about to flip silver or not, right? And it's close to doing it again. I believe it already did once or before. And I look at that stuff because I think one day it'll be monumental when Bitcoin flips gold. And I'm not saying if it flips gold. I do think it will flip gold. And I think it does provide a benchmark to kind of to figure out, is it a valid asset class or not? To say, look, if Bitcoin's market cap is legitimately flipping gold, then that's pretty interesting. But I mean, of course, you bring up good points. It wouldn't necessarily be that hard to manipulate the market cap of a cryptocurrency, right? We've seen that happen before, especially if a lot of the coins are in the hands of a very small amount of people that aren't providing liquidity or anything like that to the market. Then certainly it could call into the question how valuable it is. But again, I mainly just use it to try to figure out what is the relative value of coins against other coins. So sort of within this asset class, I don't really think of it in terms of like, oh, well, you have Tesla over here with this market cap, therefore Bitcoin is worth more or something. I don't think of it like that. I look more of it in terms of within the asset class where they compare against each other.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because it's just too easy to manipulate it with restricting supplies and then bringing supply back out. It's just sort of
right.
Is
and
the metric worth it? But
right, and you also have like the fully diluted market cap, or and then also too, like some places report the market cap is completely different than other websites just because of what they interpret to be the circulating supply.
Yeah.
So yeah, it can certainly be manipulated.
All right. So essentially, we can still use the market cap, but we just use it within the system. And if we want to compare it to silver or gold, then it's just a nice way to send a tweet to Peter and move on from that point. Yeah.
Sure.
Speaking of the market cycle, best case, worst case, how far do we have to go? Time, price? within a
Yeah.
few trillion. I see you're wearing your few trillion shirt. Is that what you got there?
No, this is just a normal one. This isn't the few trillion.
Get the merch at intothe.cryptoverse.com. All right.
Yeah. I think that a lot of people I think are thinking the cycle ends like this month or next month. I know some people thought it ended in September, some in April. You sort of have the whole spectrum of like what people believe is going to happen. And I think that I think people give themselves too much credit and like the ability, because I don't think any one of us has the ability to tell, to say exactly when the peak will be. I think the mentality of literally everyone in crypto just circling around and saying, all right, everything's going to go parabolic in December and then come crashing down mid-December like it did last year, December 17th, and then come crashing back down and then go into a long bear market. I think people give themselves too much credit. Like generally that's not how markets work. It's not like the majority gets it right. And it certainly seems like a lot of people think that's going to happen. I think that, I think that this cycle, we have a long ways to go is my personal opinion. I think we are going to go into next year for sure. As far as how far it could go out, I mean, maybe summer of 2022, maybe the end of 2022. I think there's even some evidence to suggest it could last until 2023, for all we know. I mean, again, a lot of that's just dubious speculation, and I don't say it lightly. But I mean, the 2023 stuff comes from like if you just take the prior three peaks and you sort of plot it on our Arrhenius plot of 1 over time. And
do you have that on the chart you want to show, or?
I don't actually have it. I don't have it on me right now.
That's all right.
Right. Yeah, but I do have it on my channel. I talk about it quite frequently. Basically, it would put the next peak out in August of 2023. Actually,
that's a long way. Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's a long way, and it sounds crazy, right? Like it doesn't really seem like it makes a lot of sense. But there's a lot of other things that point towards 2022 is certainly a time. My main conviction since 2019 is that I just don't think it's in 2021. Like I think that everyone thinks that it's going to be in 2021, but I don't think it's going to be in 2021. So I think the market is going to keep people on their toes, right? I think the idea that we know what's going to happen is a little bit too far-fetched. And again, look, I mean, Bitcoin's still trading at what, $64,000. 2021, before we started 2021, it was supposed to be the year, according to a lot of people, that we were going to go to 300K, right? We've actually been trading between 30 and 65K, more or less, for the entirety of the year, right? It's actually been more or less a sideways year for Bitcoin. The actual year that we did pretty good was 2020. I mean, we started, at one point in 2020, we were at $3,800. And by the end of the year, we were at $29,000. So you're talking about going up like 9x over the span of 9 months. For Bitcoin to have gone up 9x in 2021, we need to be trading at $270,000, and we're nowhere near it. And I don't think we're going to get anywhere close to those valuations by the end of the year. So 2021 has actually been more or less a sideways year for Bitcoin, not the parabolic rally, at least not so far, that everyone was counting on. In terms
do you think that still? Sorry, do you think that still works in with the 4-year cycle? I mean, I know I watched the video you did with Bob Lucas, and he has a lot of good stuff on his channel and what to say. Does that still work in with the lengthening cycle and your 4-year cycle?
Yeah, I think it depends on how you define the 4-year cycle. So a lot of people define the 4-year cycle as when the peaks are. So they look at a chart and say, well, we had a peak in December of 2017, and then they'll say we had a peak in December of 2013, which really is not true. It was November of 2013, and then the peak before that most people ignore, conveniently, I might add, is the one in June of 2011. And so I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the only 4-year cycle that Bitcoin ever had was the last one. You could argue that the first cycle had a peak in 2011 in a relatively short period of time. The second cycle was 2.5 years, the one that took place in 2012 to 2013. And then the third cycle was 4-year cycle. And then this one, in my opinion, is going to be longer than 4 years. Now, a lot of people, not Bob Lucas, believe that the 4-year cycle is defined by the peaks, right? And that means that you have to have a peak in December for it to be a 4-year cycle. Bob Lucas is a very strong proponent of the 4-year cycle. He doesn't measure it by the tops. He measures it by the bottoms. And so theoretically, you could still have a lengthened cycle and it still be in agreement with a 4-year cycle if you measure it from the bottom. Let me just show you on my screen if I can.
Yeah, I'll bring that up.
So like the 4-year cycle, I think as you mentioned, Bob Lucas, like he more or less thinks the next market cycle bottom is going to be somewhere in December, I think, of 2022. Again, this is the last time I spoke to him, and this is more or less just like vague predictions. I don't think he's saying 100% that's going to happen. I know that he wouldn't say that. But you could imagine that you could have a lengthened cycle where something like this happens, where we go up and maybe put in a market cycle peak in the summer of 2022. And then if we have a very brief bear market where we come back down, it would still sort of fit the 4-year cycle narrative of, okay, well, maybe that's the next market cycle bottom over there, which could correspond to the current prices today, right? And this is the market cycle bottom here. And then that could be 4 years apart, right? That could be 4 years apart from say, December 2018 till December 2022. But it's still technically a lengthened cycle if you measure it from the bottom to the top, right? If you're talking about December 2018, if the cycle extends out until 2022, I mean, that's certainly from bottom to top, you have a lengthened cycle, right?
Sure.
And I don't think many people can dispute that. I mean, already we're lengthened as measured from the halving. That's already happened, which, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to nickel and dime if it happens within 1 or 2 months. It could still be a 4-year cycle as measured that way. But if we pull it up as say measured from the halving, or as say measured from the market cycle bottom, I'll pull both of those up really quick and then just show you what I'm talking about. Sometimes it takes us a minute to load just because it's pulling in a lot of data. This is as measured from the halving. So you can see that already as measured from the halving, from the first halving, we went out, a certain amount of time. The second halving, the rally after the second halving took an extra 162 days. So, I mean, it's hard to know exactly how much longer this one will take, but we're already out 28 days past as far as last one. If we went another 100-something days, again, it could easily go into 2022. And then the other way to look at this is to just look at as measured from the market cycle bottom, and you can easily see that the cycle has lengthened every single time, right? This one increased by about 480 days. This one increased by about 300 and something days. So we're actually coming on the point now, I think within 5 days or so, the cycle will be the same length as the last market cycle as measured from bottom to top. But I'm speculating that we still have a ways to go, mainly just because that's what we've seen before, right? We're sort of seeing the cycles lengthen over here. So I would argue that Bitcoin still has a way to go this market cycle. And we probably won't go to go to your question about sort of like projections and whatnot. I don't think that Bitcoin's going to go to those crazier valuations of like $300,000, $400,000. It could make it there, but I would say I do believe it'll go above 100K, and I think it could even make it to 200K or so. But I don't think it's going to go to like, some people are talking about like 500K and that kind of stuff within, by the end of the year, believe it or not, or within say 3 months. I mean, obviously now that stuff sounds very far-fetched because we're now only like 6 weeks away. But there are a lot of theories. And the reason they have these theories, again, are just because we saw what happened in 2017 when things basically just shot up. In 2013, things basically shot up. So people are basically assuming that today, things are just going to shoot up in the last 3 months of the year. But actually the last month, we've just been going sideways.
And I guess the only way we could get there is if more supply comes off the exchanges and it just becomes a spike into low liquidity.
Yeah. I mean, it just takes a lot more volume to move the price now, nowadays than compared to back then. So it's just a lot harder to, I think some people look at it and say, well, look, I mean, Bitcoin went up, 150% or something in November of 2013. Therefore, it's going to do it in November of 2021. And it's just like, well, the market cap, that's the reason why people love micro caps, right? It's so easy to move the market cap because it takes so little volume. With
exactly.
With Bitcoin, that's just simply not the case. So I think we have to assume that we're going to see it take longer to move up, but that doesn't mean you can't make a lot of money. It just means you have to be more patient.
I know you got to get going soon, so I wanted to crack on with like exit plans, taxes, all that sort of stuff. But briefly, with your exit plan, that's something that you talk about in terms of when it gets overheated, just sort of selling, but you have metrics for that. Can you just run us through that a little bit? And is it something easy for, your everyday person to use?
Yeah, so I just use like a risk metric. Basically, I'm sort of just measuring the risk on an asset based on its prior returns, especially with Bitcoin and accounting for diminishing returns. And so I just look at it and I say, as it starts to get overheated, I just dollar cost average out of it. So a lot of people like to dollar cost average into a project, and then they have this misconception that they have to time the top exactly with their entire stack, right?
Yeah.
And the bad part about trying to do that is if you sell it too early, then you could, if you keep seeing it going up, even if you made a good trade, it might make you FOMO back in, and then it could drop, and then you maybe lose everything that you gained. The nice thing about sort of DCAing out is that you take some off the table. That way, if it goes back down, you've at least secured some gains, right? But you also want to give yourself the continued upside. And then the higher up the risk bands we go, the more I take off the table. So like at a low risk band, I may take off like a really small percentage, like 5 or 10%. At the highest risk bands, I'm more or less liquidating almost everything that I'm willing to liquidate, right? I mean, again, there's always going to be some that I'm not willing to liquidate. But like for instance, like back in April of 2021, or whenever we first we reached 58K before that. We were really at high risk levels, and I had sold 87% of my Bitcoin position that I was willing to sell at that time, and then Bitcoin went from 58K to 61 and then 64, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I've sold my Bitcoin, and it just keeps slowly going up. But then eventually I was rewarded and it came back down. So I mean, there are risks, right? I mean, you could always sell and it could keep going up. But at the end of the day, I just want to make sure that I don't let a good bubble go to waste. And, at the end of the day, if something is up 10x or 20x or 30x, if you take profit off, if you skim profit here or there, at least you're never going to look back and with regret of not selling,
That's the biggest one every time. And I know it's like new people always get stuck with that and just thinking, damn, I should have held on. And you're like, you don't know what that feeling is afterwards, that you sold, you made some profit, and then you see it drop all the way back down. And I guess that's the reason why personally, I don't sell Bitcoin as well in those big stashes, because I don't think we'll get those big drawdowns of 80 or 90%. You might be different, but it's so easy to do that with altcoins. So even if you sell and you miss the next 5x on the way up, you can be assured that's probably going to come down 90-95%.
Oh, yeah.
So you'll probably get a better entry again. But for Bitcoin, you don't think it'll have those sort of 80 or 90% drawdowns again?
I don't know if it'll have 90% drawdowns, maybe 80. One of the nice things about diminishing returns is usually you would think it would also apply to the downside as well. So hopefully the drawdowns won't be quite as bad. I mean, we already saw a 55% drop, right? I mean, in 2021. So certainly I think 60 and 70% drops are still theoretically in the cards, but it also depends on how high up we go. I mean, if Bitcoin goes into a parabolic mania mode where it just shoots up to $200,000 in 3 months or something, then of course we could come back down to 60K, But if it's just like a slow grind up, I think that's actually a much better scenario for everyone involved, because you sort of
way healthier.
It's so much healthier. I also think it's important to think about what the risk is on the next 2x, right? So like when I first got Ethereum, the risk on it going from like, say, a certain value to another, or say let's just take it for this market cycle, right? Because a lot of people can relate to it this market cycle. Imagine buying Ethereum at $100. The risk on the next 2x to go to $200 is not that high. I mean, it's just that to go up to 200. But then from 2 to 400, it's still not that risky. From 4 to 8 wasn't that risky. 8 to 16, still not that risky, because we're still flirting with a prior all-time high. 16 to 32, 3,200, right? 3,200 to 6,400. It's getting a little bit riskier, but it still seems like it's possible, right? I mean, there's still some possibilities there that you can make it. But eventually, when you get to the point where you're talking about, all right, if Ethereum's one day trading for $20,000 or something, first of all, is it worth holding your entire position on the off chance it goes to 40K? Because the alternative is, what if you could take profits, and then if it goes back down into a bear market and you buy it at the bear market bottom, and let's say the bear market bottom is at 4K, then going from 4K to 8K in a bear market bottom is the same as going from 20K to 40K, right? It's just that people don't think about it like that. So think about the risk on the next 2x. At some point, the market can just no longer sustain the prices. And then people run for the exits.
Thinking about taking profits, have you ever thought about, this might get a little bit out there for some people, but moving to avoid a lot of capital gains?
No, I haven't. I mean, we're pretty settled here, and our, kids are in school and whatnot, and we don't really want to disrupt any of that stuff. So No, I mean, I just sort of see it as I'm just doing my part, I guess. Like
it's the cost of doing business in America.
Yeah, it's just the cost of doing business, and if I'm paying taxes, at least it means I'm making money, right? I mean, if you're not paying, I mean, it's a sign that your investments did well, right? So it's unfortunate that you have short-term capital gains that's like so high, but I do try to generally avoid that, and so no, I don't really seriously consider moving. Maybe in like 20 years or something, but not anytime soon.
And the kids are out of school. But what about if they brought in the unrealized capital gains?
Yeah,
is there a line that you draw in the sand and you go,
I still wouldn't. I mean, it might change my investment strategy potentially. Like maybe it would change my investment strategy. Like maybe I would have to take profits more frequently so I can actually pay the taxes that they're making me pay on stuff that I haven't actually realized. Like if they want you to pay taxes on something that you're not actually making money on yet, then you have to actually go sell it to do that. No, I don't really think there's a line for me at the moment, but I know for a lot of people there are. I know a lot of people have moved, but I'm not looking to do that.
I bring it up because that's something that I'm thinking of. Eventually I'll do it, but yeah, it's everyone's lifestyle is different. And what we do with the profits after the crypto cycle, do you go back into stock market? Do you dubiously speculate in land values? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm already in the stock market a lot. So I think it's good to basically have your foot in a lot of different doors. That way, if one goes through a bear market, you're still focused on other asset classes. Like if in 2018 everyone was only focused on crypto, it'd be kind of depressing. So like when you have those phases, it's nice to have other asset classes that you're exposed to. I don't really focus much on precious metals just because I don't really, their risk-adjusted returns aren't that great. That doesn't mean they can't go up.
Not even silver? You don't like the beta on silver?
I do have small positions. I'm not saying I don't have small positions. I just think that, for me, an allocation in precious metals is a very small percentage of my portfolio. And look, I mean, you look at the Sharpe ratio of precious metal portfolio over the last 30 years, it's awful. I mean, look at what gold was the same price it was when Bitcoin was launched, right? So again, I'm not saying they can't go up, but think about, Bitcoin's up 100 million% over the last 10 years, and gold hasn't even kept up with inflation. I do think silver is more likely to outperform gold over the next 5 years. If I had to guess, I'd say silver's likely to outperform gold. But I think the stock market is a great place. I think that real estate is definitely a good place. I also think, putting it into stable coins and earning 8 or 9% on some platforms could be a good solution as well. And then you could use the money that generates to then do other stuff with, right? But I certainly will be sitting on some cash at that point because I'll want to just take a step back and kind of compose myself and then figure out what the strategy is and then probably prepare for the next cycle, right? Just prepare for the next cycle and what I want to focus on.
So do you think you'll change the channel to stock market when the bear market hits?
Yeah, we actually, I do sometimes talk about the stock market, but I will talk more about.
I was joking, by the way, but yeah.
No. I actually do think I will talk more about. I got to get going here in a minute. We will talk about the stock market on the channel. We do sometimes talk about Tesla and the S&P and stuff, but we will talk more about that when crypto's in a bear market. I'm not just going to come on the channel and say, hey, everything's down 10% again, forever. So.
That'd be very depressing.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, I reckon it's a good place to wrap up until we chat next time. Hopefully it's before the market ends and we don't have to talk about stocks, but we'll see what happens at that point. Ben, what's your outro? Do you want to outro us?
I would tell people to take everyone's crazy predictions with a grain of salt and kind of keep your head down and maybe DCA into projects you want to have and then just go, just get along for the ride, right? As I said before, you don't always have to time it. You just need a ticket to the show, right? So I think that's the more important thing. So yeah, that's what I would leave you with.
Easy. All right, guys, you could get Ben's channel. Everything's down below in the description. I'll leave it there for YouTube, Twitter. Chat to you over there on Twitter. Thanks again, mate. I really appreciate it. And do all the things like, share, subscribe. See you guys at the next video. Till then, have more fun.